I don't mean to laugh at your childhood misfortune.
It was
Sorry.
kind of funny. His name was Zippity. Full name, Zippity Doodah.
Of course.
Hello and welcome to the St. Louis Wind Symphony podcast. My name is Matt McKeever.
And I'm Lisa McMahon.
And we're both members of the St. Louis Wind Symphony. In this podcast, Lisa and I will highlight, discuss, and listen to pieces that will be featured on upcoming Wind Symphony concerts.
Established in 1998, the St. Louis Wind Symphony is a non-profit, all-volunteer concert band dedicated to preserving and performing quality wind band music, supporting music education, and commissioning new works.
We hope you enjoyed this edition of the St. Louis Wind Symphony podcast.
All right, welcome back to the St. Louis Wind Symphony podcast. I'm Lisa McMahon. I'm here with Matt McKeever.
Hello, everybody.
We have been on a little bit of a hiatus from doing this podcast. I wish we could say it's for a good cause, but let's just suffice it to say the last year of teaching was a bit intense for every single teacher, and we got busy, and it's a nonprofit, so we're glad to be back.
Yes, and in person. I think we've had a couple in-person ones, but I recall at the height of the pandemic, I was in my garage.
We're on Zoom.
You on Zoom, and that was interesting. So it's good to be back to normal.
We've all learned some new skills in the past couple years. But we're excited to talk about our upcoming concert on Sunday, October 9th. It's at 3 o'clock p.m. and it is at the 560 Music Center. It's on the campus of Washington University here in St. Louis, Missouri. And we've got 3 pieces that we're going to talk about today. I want to say there's 7 pieces on the program, somewhere around that.
Yeah.
We're going to focus on 3 of them because one of them is kind of a big one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We're actually going to be doing a world premiere of a commissioned work. That's a work that was written specifically for our ensemble. And it's written by Robert Sheldon, who is a very prominent name, very big name in the band world. Those who have played band music or taught band music know Robert Sheldon's music. He writes fantastic music for young musicians all the way up to professional musicians. We've done a number of his pieces in the past, and so one of our band members,
Pete Paletti.
Right, mm-hmm. Pete commissioned Mr. Sheldon to write this piece of music, and we'll talk about this commissioning process, but this is not the first time that Pete has commissioned someone. A couple of years ago, he had Julie Giroux write a piece of music for the band, and now he has Robert Sheldon doing it. So, and the other cool thing is that Mr. Sheldon is going to be with us conducting the piece, which is fantastic. He's also going to be conducting another one of his pieces called Incandescent Sky, and that rehearsal is on Saturday, so just coming up here in a couple days. We'll be rehearsing with him on Saturday, and then we have the concert on Sunday.
It's super exciting. The piece is actually dedicated to both Dan Pressgrave, who is our conductor emeritus. He's one of the music directors that started the Wind Symphony, and also Faye Siegel, who was one of our clarinetists, longtime clarinetists, mm-hmm. and she passed away a few years ago. So It's a dual dedication to both Dan Pressgrave and Faye Siegel. And it was ready to go right when the pandemic hit.
Right, that's right.
So it's kind of been in the can for a year and a half. So we're just excited to finally not just premiere it, but would you say this feels more like a normal season?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we're, personnel is kind of, it's not as much of an issue as it was in the past. I mean,
sure.
we had some people who opted out last season, and then, obviously being very cautious about if someone's sick, don't play. So there were a lot of subs, and I think things have kind of settled in a little bit more now, and we feel comfortable. And the season feels normal. It's actually a really exciting season.
Yes.
Every concert, I believe, has a different theme. As
mm-hmm.
opposed to in the past where we've done one theme for the entire season. We're kind of going with different themes, but the themes are somewhat related.
Yes.
And I believe the theme for this one is Within Our Borders.
Within Our Borders, that's right.
And I think it's because we have a piece that's being commissioned for us. We're doing a piece by a local composer, and we're doing pieces that are inspired by America, American pieces. So
I can't wait to talk about the variations on America, by
the
way.
Yeah.
I'm really excited about that.
They're all pieces that have, connection to being within our borders, our home, or whatever that is. So
it's a good generic theme that can kind of superimpose a bunch of different things.
Later in the season, we're having one that's beyond our borders, which will feature music from other places. We're going to have some guest soloists. Really excited about that concert and about some of the guest soloists we have who are going to be performing with us later in the season. So it's a really awesome season. Tom Poshak and Gary Barandis have picked some really awesome music. And this particular program is just a lot of fun to play. It's one of the more fun programs I play with the Wind Symphony. So
I agree. And if I may go on a tangent just for a second, and you and I have talked about this a little bit, it's super nice to be involved with an organization that not just takes the input from its members in terms of what we play. They really do. Tom and Gary absolutely take input from the musicians who play. What should we play? What pieces do you remember playing that you really liked or whatever? Or what have you heard of? They really listen to the Wind Symphony members. They don't always take it as a directive, but they absolutely take it as a direction.
Sure.
Look in this direction, turn your head this way, that sort of thing. And I've been very appreciative of how that translated to the pandemic as well, because they absolutely took the lead of the musicians in terms of, this is what our comfort level is. This is what we think we need to be doing. And for the most part, the Wind Symphony members really were kind of in solidarity in terms of precautions that we needed to take and everything. And I just have to say, it's really rewarding to be involved with an organization like that.
Right.
That being said, how awesome is it to be in person in
absolutely.
a normal rehearsal? It's really nice.
Yeah.
Matt mentioned that Robert Sheldon is going to be with us this Saturday, both as a conductor and also we get to rehearse with him. I don't believe that we've had him in before.
No, I not as long as I've been with the Wind Symphony. No.
So I'm pretty excited about that. He's going to be doing Incandescent Sky, which is one of his pieces. And then he's going to be doing a piece called Route 66. Or excuse me, it's called 66. It's about Route 66.
Right.
And it's kind of a musical adventure on what it's like to drive that route, which I believe starts in Chicago and goes all the way to California.
Right.
So it's a kind of a wild work. I know one of the sections talks about the weird, wacky, and wonderful. So it talks about all the completely oddball things that you see. The world's largest ball of twine or whatever.
the various roadside attractions, because
that's fun.
As we we're very familiar with Route 66. In fact, I've got a sign right there.
I looked at that. You have a Route 66 neon sign here in your basement.
So where we're recording right now, we are basically a stone's throw from Route 66.
Yes.
So because I'm in Crestwood and we're right off Watson Road, which is part of Route 66. Now I looked this up, and Route 66 has, over the years, it's changed. So there's a lot of. I always kind of wondered that, like, why are there so many roads in St. Louis that claim to be Route 66?
Because historic Route 66.
Because it's changed over time.
Yep.
So there's it's not just one straight road that's never changed. But there are parts of it where it goes through big cities, and there's parts where it goes through very small towns, and roadside attractions and things of that nature, and tourist traps and all the things in between.
Excuse me, tourist attractions.
There you go. Yeah.
They're not traps.
No traps. But it is a really neat piece, and it was Pete's idea to do the Route 66, and I remember a couple of years ago the Missouri History Museum had a exhibit on Route 66, and that was really cool.
Oh, okay.
It was very cool, and so I was very excited about the prospect of doing a piece like this. And each movement, they're not really, they're kind of movements that just go straight through. They're not stop and go movements. But I think it starts off, it's kind of like the journey begins or something of that nature, and then we go through a section where it's kind of more jazzy. I'm thinking it was maybe an ode to the song Route 66. It's got a blues feel to it, almost like a big band kind of feel.
A whole concert band swing.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. which I have a lot of opinions on. But it's actually it's really,
well done. It's well done, and it's fun to play.
It's really well written. And it's very fun to play. And then there's kind of a more introspective third section, which is really beautiful. And then I think then it's the
weird, wacky, whatever, wonderful. That's the last section.
I think it kind of rounds out with, like, you've made it to
California
because and there's and I haven't even really learned all of them. I wish I had a list of them, but there are apparently a number of little Easter eggs and winks and nods throughout the piece to various songs and various things connected to whether it's to California or to parts of the road, or like I said, the song Route 66. So
I wonder if he'll talk about that when he's with us on Saturday.
I hope he does. I've John Panhorst, who sits next to me in the Wind Symphony, goes, "Oh, there's this song in this section." I'm like, "Really? I didn't hear it. I'm not sure I even knew what the song was, but yeah, I think there's a number of things sort of cleverly hidden in the piece. So that's going to be a lot of fun playing that piece, and I think we also have a post-concert.
Yes, we have a Route 66 tie-in post-concert. So one of the attractions along Route 66, historic Route 66, is an ice cream place here in St. Louis called Ted Drew's.
Frozen custard.
I'm not a St. Louis native, so I don't understand how serious
dare
this
call
is.
It ice cream.
Please excuse me.
It's frozen custard.
So Ted Drew's frozen custard.
Yes.
We're going to have some for sale there at the 560 building immediately after the concert, so stick around for that. I'm kind of excited because I get to go pick up 200 cups of frozen custard on Friday. It's all going to be in my deep freeze, and it's going to be
it's funny
tempting not to eat it all.
This just popped into my mind. This is kind of a funny little anecdote. Tom Poshak used to come work with my band at Bishop DeBerg High School, which is just down the street from Ted Drew's. And the deal always was, I'd say, Tom, what's your clinician fee? He goes, "Oh, don't worry about it. Just take me to Ted Drew's when we're done." So,
in fairness, wouldn't you do a clinic for Ted Drew's?
Sure, absolutely.
I mean,
so that was kind of our deal for a couple of years. Tom would come and work with my band, and then we'd go drive down to Ted Drew's, and I'd get him a concrete or something like that. So.
I would do work for frozen yogurt.
Yeah.
I would definitely do that.
Yeah.
So you mentioned Pete doing a commission, or essentially sponsoring a commission. Can we talk a little bit about the commission process and what that looks like?
Yeah.
Now, we can't necessarily speak to the specifics of this commission because it is a very personal process. It's a very personal interaction with each composer. But essentially, there is some sort of commissioning body, whether it's a school or it's a group like the Wind Symphony or it's a college or whatever, that will arrange a work, or they'll arrange a contract with a particular composer. Now, you can speak to this as a composer yourself, and you said you're working on a commission right now. Correct me if I'm wrong. There's usually a predetermined amount before you even get started.
A dollar amount?
Yes.
Yeah. Everybody does it different. I sort of treat it like it's sort of like an a la carte kind of thing. Like there's a list of this is how long. For me, the big things are, and I think most composers are this way, it's about the length of the piece and the difficulty of the piece. Obviously, the longer the piece, the longer it takes to write, the more work, and it should cost more if it's a longer piece of music. And, if it's a more challenging piece or there's more instrumentation that's involved, that's going to cost more as well. So We're always talking about length of piece and
the grade,
usually
probably.
grade level. And then there's other things too that I take into account, and I know other composers do too. Like if you want it to be about something specific, then that might be a little bit more because you're putting in a little bit more work to try to fit that stuff in. If you want to feature certain soloists, there's other various sort of little elements that are all kind of discussed when you're kind of trying to come up with a dollar amount as far as what's appropriate for this piece, how much time is it going to take, or if someone says I really want to include, I want this melody to be included, or I want this piece to be this something specific, if it's something that's unique that the composer has to maybe work a little extra hard to get into the piece, then that might be reflected in the total.
Do you find when you're writing something, do you try to keep it relatively generic in terms of difficulty amongst the sections, or do you definitely take in, if the commissioning body says, hey, we've got a really killer trumpet section, do you maybe write geared towards that, but then have to also think about, because you're going to want to publish this piece later,
right.
So you don't want a grade 3 piece that's really got grade 5 trumpet parts,
right? Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, you do kind of try to think about if it's too specific to that particular group, then it may not be very marketable. I always try to keep my pieces in a way that, I could edit up later on. Like, for example, I did a commission where they didn't have a bass player as far as tuba or bari sax or bass clarinet. So I wrote an electric bass part because they did have an electric bass player. So, but, I made it so once that I gave them that particular piece, I sort of rearranged it so that it could have some of those wind parts. So
yeah, there's the premiere version and then the published version.
Sure.
Okay.
And, you know, there's kind of a list of questions that the composer will ask the commissioning body, like, do you want to feature a particular section? If you just want it to be kind of even across the board, that's fine. You know, what limitations do you have as far as instrumentation? You know, I mean, for someone like Robert Sheldon's, presumably when he's commissioning something, it's a fully stocked band. You know, I mean, I don't think he's writing flexible arrangements.
For sure. Well, he might be. Who knows? Yeah.
But you know, for someone like me writing kind of smaller scale stuff, it's like, you know, what's your instrumentation look like? Do you want to feature certain strengths of the band, certain sections? What percussion instruments do you have available to you is another question.
Oh, yeah, I didn't think about that.
How many percussion, you know, obviously a number of people in the band too, number for each instrument. So, you know, like, you know, if there's a small clarinet section, maybe I don't do a big clarinet choir section or something. And then how many percussionists do you have, you know, so you can figure out how many percussion parts you want to write. And that's one of the harder parts is percussion, like figuring out what percussion parts how many percussion parts you want to put into it and how many players you want to have to play it. You know, it's like, sure, like John Mackey can write a foundry that calls for like 15 percussionists, but you know, and he's done very well writing pieces like that.
Sure.
But you know, for most of us, it's like we're trying to write something for 3 or 4 percussionists. You know.
Sure. You mentioned flexible instrumentation pieces, and that's an interesting development because Randall Standridge is doing a lot of those right now, and actually Robert Sheldon is now an editor for Randall Standridge's publishing company, which I think that's kind of a fascinating collaboration because you've got someone who with a million years in the business and several published pieces, and Randall Standridge's company is a relatively new company. So I think it's a really cool kind of bridging the gap situation to where like Robert Sheldon is an editor for a lot of the flexible instrumentation stuff that Randall Standridge's company is putting out. So it's kind of it's an interesting time to be in band world right now.
And those flexible arrangements are, I mean, it's really hard to write. I mean, it's not easy to turn 3 or 4 parts into something that sounds good, and then figuring out which instruments belong in each one of those parts. I mean, I'm really jealous, I guess is the right word, of people like Randall Standridge and Brian Balmages, who can write these really wonderful pieces and write them in flexible arrangements, and they sound good no matter what instruments are playing them. It's awesome, and I wish I were better at that. But in Sheldon's case, I'm assuming, and especially with his Route 66, I mean, he's got a fully stocked band. Which, by the way, he actually included some non-traditional band instruments in this arrangement.
Yes, he did.
There is piano, which is not totally non-traditional, but it's not in your average band piece. And then there's also, I believe it's acoustic guitar in this piece as well. And we've got Melissa Catlin playing it, who's I went to Webster with. And she's going to be playing the guitar part. None of us have heard the guitar part yet. There's some moments in the piece where it's just silence.
And we have Tom just going, guitar!
There's the guitar part. So we're going to hear that on Saturday for the first time.
I'm sure it'll be great.
So that's really interesting. And I don't know if that's necessarily something that Pete specifically asked for, or you know, Mr. Sheldon was just like, hey, I'm feeling a guitar part here, so I'm going to put it in there. So,
I kind of like that idea. You know, I'm feeling crystal water goblets at this moment.
Exactly.
Let's put it in there.
I mean, who knows? So
I like it when composers go rogue.
Yeah, so I'm
So
kind of
we'll
excited to hear that guitar part. That'll
be cool.
That's going to be really cool.
So, I mean, it's going to be an exciting concert in general, but this piece, and especially because it's so long anticipated, we've been waiting for a year and a half to do it. So it's going to be a pretty special thing. Can we listen to a little bit of Robert Sheldon piece?
Yeah, I think we're going to listen to Incandescent Sky, which is another piece that he did as a commission, I think just a couple of years ago. And when the discussion of him coming in to work with the band was happening, it was like, well, we're not just going to play one piece. If you're coming all the way in, let's do another one of your pieces. So I believe it was probably Robert Sheldon who said, let's do Incandescent Sky. Let's do this piece as well. So we'll listen to a little bit of that piece. That piece is already published. We're not premiering that one, so there are recordings of it available out there. So let's listen to just a little bit of...
Let's listen to 30 seconds so we don't get any sort of copyright trouble.
Yeah, we have to stay under that mark.
Yep.
So let's listen to a short excerpt of Incandescent Sky by Robert Sheldon.
Okay, up next, we're going to be talking about Eric Whitacre's piece, October. I always love it when I play this in October.
Yes.
Love it.
Yeah, it's a fantastic piece. I think this is really, well, no, I take that back. I was about to say this is the band piece that put Eric Whitacre on the map. I really think that was Ghost Train, though. I think Ghost Train was his first one. But this piece, I think, is probably the piece that's gotten the most airtime.
This is the one that cemented him as a concert band ballad writer, I think. Has primarily been a choral composer, and of course he's been doing, 2,000 member virtual choirs long before it was required of the pandemic, So I was actually introduced to Eric Whitacre as a choral composer, just doing things for choir in high school and college. So every now and then when it would cross over, my little nerdy heart just got very, very excited about it. And I want to say that October was the first band piece that I played of Eric Whitacre's that used a lot of these cluster chords, these really, really, really tight intervals. And I think that was the first time that it was like, oh my gosh, this is really difficult to tune. Because you look at it on the page and it's eighth notes, right? It's eighth notes and quarter notes and a lot of whole notes. And you go, oh, surely I could play this with my middle school. But then when you start digging into the score, no, in fact, you cannot.
It also, it's in a number of pretty challenging keys.
Yes.
At one point, it's in D flat for a while. I think it's in C. I'm trying to think what other keys it goes through. But it cycles through a number of different keys. So it's a very challenging piece. But it's
gorgeous.
It's absolutely beautiful. I've known the piece and I've conducted the piece and programmed the piece. But actually sitting in the ensemble and playing it, I guess I played it in college, but I don't remember anything from college. But playing it now, it's
oh man,
it's. I have a whole new respect for the piece. Not that I didn't have respect for it, but just like, man, this is such a good. I just turned to the musician next to me. I'm just like, this is such a good piece, and so well written, and it just kind of gives everybody a chance to be featured. And I mean, it just doesn't get any better. It's really it's a modern classic.
I think
Absolutely.
every time I hear this or I play it or it comes on a Spotify playlist or whatever, the word that just comes into my mind is how mature it sounds. It's just you can't be an overly bright tuned ensemble and play this piece. It's just such a rich, darkly tuned kind of piece, and it just requires a musical maturity that you got to know what you're doing before you program it.
Right, and like I said, I think I would really put this, as much as any piece has been written in the last 20 years, I would put this at the top of the list of pieces that are cemented as a band classic, and sort of that essential list. So it's really a wonderful piece. What year was it written?
Early 2000s. I don't know off the top of my head. Would you say though, the first time we read it with the Wind Symphony, and I feel like we've done it with the Wind Symphony.
I think we have.
Before, I wish that I could tell you when.
I think it was when it was relatively new.
Yeah, I will say when we read it this time around, it was one of the early. I think it was the first rehearsal that we came back for this particular season, and Gary Brandis looks at it all and goes, "So everyone's played this, right?"
Yeah.
And so then it was kind of cool because it was not. There weren't a whole lot of missed notes and key signatures because everybody's played it at some point. So then it's a question of, how is Gary going to do this, right? What are the specific spots that we have to watch for this stretch tempo or this elongated fermata or whatever? That's kind of nice to play with professional caliber musicians. Yeah. Because you don't have to spend a whole lot of time going, no, that's a G flat, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You can just say, okay, we're going to make music out of this. And it's just so rewarding to be back into some gasp of normalcy,
So the piece really, for those who haven't heard the piece, it really evokes the feeling of October, of the fall. I just think of like,
Supposedly this is Eric Whitacre's favorite month.
Yeah, it just evokes the feeling of like swirling leaves in the wind and orange trees, and I mean, really, it really makes it feel like the month, and it's just got such a, not even like melancholy feel to it, but it's just very calm and very soothing, and just very like mellow. I mean, it's got some big moments, but
for sure,
I don't know. It's a wonderful piece. I'm so glad we're doing it. So we'll listen to a little bit of October here. Did you have something else?
Oh yes, I have to mention this. This is
right.
Yeah, this is both.
This is the
it's
band
an urban legend.
The band Urban Legend.
An urban legend. So I want to say that it was one of the first times that I played this. I'm sure it was college. I don't remember if it was undergraduate or grad school, but somehow we all started. I don't know if somebody said it or they were just like, oh, I heard this, but the urban legend was going around at the time in the early 2000s that that October had musical code in it. So it's actually the euphonium solo that's about halfway through. It's gorgeous, but it's very modal, and it's for sure in the key, and it's kind of a modular variation of the melody that's at the beginning in the oboe solo, but not really. And so the urban legend that goes around is that if you take that euphonium solo and you translate that to scale degrees, right? That the scale degrees as numbers are the phone number of this beautiful woman that he met in the park in October, who of course then ended up being his wife.
It's
So that's the urban legend. The urban legend is the euphonium solo. Somehow you translate that to scale degrees, and that was his wife's phone number when they first met, in an idyllic, October in the park, falling leaves, and meet cute.
And that's not an uncommon thing for composers to do. For example,
no, not at all. That's why I think it endured, because it's plausible.
Right. Now, because one of the pieces that I wrote was about, we did this last season with the Wind Symphony, or with the Youth Wind Symphony. It was a piece about Mars rover, and this Mars rover had been on Mars for 5,551 days. 5,111 days, 5111, and I used those scale degrees as the main motif for the piece. So
I think that's why I told you about this, because I knew you would totally understand this code.
Yeah, absolutely. So composers do that all the time. They going all the way back. Didn't Bach include his name?
He included his name, but that wasn't numeric code. That was text code.
Right.
Anyway,
exactly.
We're getting off topic.
Yeah. So not totally implausible that this would be a possibility.
No, but of course I have a rather embarrassing addendum to all of this. So, early 2000s, Lisa is unashamed. I'm like, oh, I'll find this out for real. So I somehow, I don't know if it was on his website, because he was still kind of new.
He was still sharing his
it was still kind of new in the whole composing game. So it was like on his website or something. It was like, contact me, Eric Whitaker at whatever, probably Hotmail or something, right? So I totally emailed him, and like many, many paragraphs of long-winded, oh my gosh, I love your music so much, blah, 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 blah. And is the musical code thing real? I just think that's such the most romantic story. His response reads as follows, because of course I saved the email. Email from Eric Whitaker to me in early 2000 said, "Dear Lisa, thanks for playing October. No, there's no secret code. I just thought it sounded good."
That's it.
That's it. And I was just like, he thinks that I'm playing it. And I was, second flute in whatever group I was playing.
Yeah.
So, of course, like this urban legend is totally debunked in 15 words or less from the composer itself.
Isn't that what we're all aiming for?
Isn't that what we're all aiming for? That's right. That's right. Lessons learned, right?
Yeah.
So let's listen to a little bit of October, and then we're going to come back and talk about Charles Ives.
Maybe we'll listen to the euphonium solo.
Just for funsies.
Yeah.
All right, we just heard October, probably the euphonium solo, just for sarcasm. Thanks, Matt. Now we're going to talk about Charles Ives. Where do we start? He's so crazy, man. He's so crazy. It's great.
I mean, he's kind of the sort of an unlikely hero in the sense that...
What did we say before we started this? Insurance salesman by day, cutting-edge composer by night.
Yeah, basically. I mean, he was a composer who had a day gig and was an insurance salesman, but also just in the midst of just having a normal life and a normal job, wrote music that, really actually influenced a lot of 20th century music, and not just extended techniques, but extended harmonies, and stuff that was
crazy pants ideas. Like,
Right.
let's have two bands and they're both playing in different keys or in different time signatures or whatever,
And this is used a lot. It's kind of overused, but it's not hyperbole at all when we say like he was ahead of his time, in the sense that like he was doing things that. And I'm pretty certain that early in his career, his music was not really very well known, and was not really widely considered to be good, because he was using some interesting stuff. But I think he gained recognition because some of his contemporaries, some other composers who maybe had a little bit of clout, were like, hey, this guy's worth checking out. This guy's writing good stuff. Mm-hmm. And only later in his life did he really get recognition for his compositions. But a really interesting character, not somebody who I think was a well, I guess in a sense I was going to say he wasn't a prodigy, but he started writing at a very young age.
Yeah, and actually, so this particular piece, it was originally written for organ, and he wrote it at age 17.
Yeah.
There's a fun anecdote that is, according to his biographers, when he premiered this, when he actually did like a touring, a local touring concert series with this, his father apparently made him skip some of the sections of this Variations on America that had like 2 or 3 keys happening at the same time because they were, and I quote, unsuitable for church performance. They upset the elderly ladies and made the little boys laugh and get noisy.
That's good.
Unquote.
Upset the elderly ladies.
Don't upset the elderly ladies, man. Don't upset the elderly ladies.
It's sort of the original, like, those kids and their rock and roll music.
Except it's Ives playing Variations on America on an organ.
Yeah.
So Variations on America, it is the melody to what we know as My Country 'Tis of Thee, but of course we Americans have to borrow things from everybody else. So at the time it was written, 1891, it was still known as God Save the Queen because it was Queen Victoria at the time. I have to say the timing of when our rehearsals started just kind of made this a little uncomfortable because, of course, we know that melody is God Save the Queen. Mm-hmm. And our first rehearsal was like 3 days after Queen Elizabeth died. Yeah. And so one of the first sections that we rehearsed of this was a statement of that melody with all these grace notes, and it's all very out of time and very slurry, and it sounds very drunk. And I have to be honest, I kind of looked around the ensemble, and we were all kind of like, eesh. Should we be doing this like 4 days after the Queen died? Yeah. So there were a lot of just kind of, is this okay? Does this feel disrespectful? But we got over that by the next rehearsal. So there's that.
So generally, Ives is kind of considered a composer that when you listen to his music, not all of his music, but some of his music, it definitely sort of makes you step back and go, oh, that's a really interesting sound, Mm-hmm. And that has to deal with the idea of, as Lisa was mentioning, dissonances and polytonality. Mm-hmm. Polytonality meaning multiple keys at once, and that does happen a couple times in this particular piece, Variations on America. He also deals a lot with polyrhythms as well, where there's mm-hmm. multiple different rhythms happening at once, and I think he hints at that a little bit in this piece, but honestly, this is, comparatively speaking to some of his other pieces, this is pretty light, and this is pretty tonal. It's not quite as dissonant as some of his other pieces. Like there's one piece, I think it's called something like Country Band, where it's supposed to imitate two different marching bands, like colliding, basically, or are going past each other.
They're coming towards each other, and then they pass each other.
Right. So you're hearing essentially two different marching bands playing at once, and that somehow he wrote that for one band to happen.
Which, that sounds like a fever dream, right?
It's crazy. I mean, just to think of that. And we're actually not totally unfamiliar with Charles Ives. We did a piece of his, I think, 2 seasons ago. It was a multi-movement work called Old Home Days, and I think this was sort of a collection of pieces that Ives had written, like short pieces. They're all a minute to a minute and a half long. And I remember this piece distinctly for 2 reasons. One, the final movement was London Bridge is fallen down, not falling, but fallen down, exclamation point. That's the final movement. And it is a tonal and rhythmic takeoff on the familiar tune, mm-hmm. Which we may imagine to be typical of young Ives' unruly keyboard improvisations. So it had.
I wonder if Ives would be a jazz man these days.
Possibly, possibly. But it
Had he been born later.
Yeah, it had a lot of polytonality, some really, really strange rhythms. And then there was another movement.
This is the one that captured your attention
Right,
so much.
I never forgot this one. It was called Slow March. It was the fourth movement of the piece. It's allegedly the earliest surviving piece written by Ives, and he wrote it as a child for the funeral of a family pet, and it was inscribed, "To the children's faithful friend." So I just remember, I think Gary Brandis mentioned that in rehearsal and says, that's really kind of cool. They took just a little melody that he wrote for his pet passing away and turned it into a full band piece. So
do you picture like a child grieving and just like in the grief process, just making his family sit down and listen to this thing? Okay, I wrote this for Rudy or whatever,
maybe.
Right?
Maybe. I mean, I know when my gerbil died when I was a kid, I played kazoo at his funeral.
So clearly, that's your.
I mean,
you totally get where Ives is coming from.
Absolutely, yeah.
As a composer and also a pet lover.
Absolutely. So anyway, that was Old Home Days. We did that a couple years ago.
I'm sorry, I'm not laughing at your childhood
No, it's okay.
pain.
It's okay. But so we're not totally unfamiliar with Ives, and Ives has written a number of popular pieces for band and other ensembles, but certainly someone that should be in the conversation as
absolutely.
A truly original American composer.
Within our borders.
Right, exactly.
Within our borders.
So really interesting piece, great piece. There's some really fun moments in it. It's just a fun piece, and that's going to round out our concert. So it's a really diverse mix of pieces. We've got Slow and Beautiful. We've got
Ives.
Ives, yeah.
He's kind of in a category all by himself.
Exactly.
And if I'm not mistaken, this is the closer, right? This is how we're closing out the concert?
Yeah. So
Sure.
We've got the commission, and we've got some other pieces too that we're featuring a local composer. And it's going to be a really, really neat concert, kind of one of the more diverse concerts
Absolutely.
as far as like different pieces we're doing. So definitely something you're not going to want to miss. And just to see Robert Sheldon.
So can we listen to a little bit of bit of Ives? Let's listen to some Ives.
I almost forgot. We'll find a nice, interesting section of Variations on America by Charles Ives.
And when we come back, we'll talk about when you can hear us live. So we listened to an excerpt of Ives. We've talked about Eric Whitacre. We've talked about Robert Sheldon. So we should discuss when and where you can hear this concert that we're hyping up so much. So our concert is this Sunday. It is October 9th. It is at 3 o'clock p.m. It's at the 560 Music Center. That's on the campus of Washington University. Really awesome program, and stick around afterwards for some Ted Drew's frozen custard.
Yes.
Sorry, I can't say ice cream, even though that's totally what it is. It's not frozen. It's frozen custard.
Agree to disagree.
That's fine. That's totally fine. We hope to see everybody there. I'm excited to be back in a live setting, doing actual band things.
Right.
So,
Right.
Matt, thanks for having me over.
Absolutely. Go hear some live music. Come check us out. I think you'll really enjoy it.